You never think it's going to be you. Sure, you hear the stories. Some guy finds out his wife's been cheating. His whole life implodes, and you think, man, that sucks. But then you go back to your own life, confident that stuff only happens to other people. Not me. Not us. Not my wife. I was wrong. This whole thing kicked off about 4 months ago. But looking back, the signs had been there for much longer. The late nights at work, the new perfume she started wearing, the way she suddenly cared about going to the gym. I brushed it off at first. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure husband who assumes the worst. But as the weeks went by, little things started stacking up. One night, she came home late, claiming she'd been out with the girls. Except, her so-called best friend, Lisa, posted a picture on Instagram that night. It was just Lisa and her husband having dinner at some fancy restaurant. No sign of my wife. That was the first red flag that really hit me, but I still didn't say anything. I figured maybe I was overthinking it. Then there was her phone. She started keeping it on silent all the time, always flipping it screen side down when she set it on the table. She'd smile at texts but never tell me who they were from. If I even glanced her way while she was on it, she'd quickly lock the screen. It didn't feel right. The tipping point came on a random Wednesday night. I came home from work early, surprise half day because of some system outage at the office. I walked in, and the house was unusually quiet. Normally, she'd have music on or the TV blaring, but there was nothing, just silence. I headed upstairs, and that's when I heard her voice. She was in our bedroom, laughing softly, talking to someone on the phone. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see her lying on the bed, twirling her hair like a teenager. And then she said it. I miss you too. Can't wait to see you again. That was it. My heart dropped like a lead weight. I felt this hot wave of anger and disbelief crash over me, but I didn't barge in. Not yet. I wanted to know who the hell this guy was. So I pulled out my phone and started recording. She didn't say much else, just a few more flirty comments, but it was enough to confirm everything. When she hung up, I pushed the door open. Who were you talking to? I said, my voice low and steady, but I could feel my hands shaking. Her eyes went wide, like a deer caught in headlights. What? Nobody. I was just talking to Lisa. Don't lie to me, I snapped, stepping into the room. I heard everything. You miss him? You can't wait to see him? Who is he? She stammered, trying to come up with some excuse, but I wasn't having it. I pulled out my phone and hit play, letting her hear her own words. Her face turned pale as she realized I had her dead to rights. It's not what you think, she finally said, her voice trembling. He's just a friend. Lies. I roared. Friends don't talk like that. Friends don't hide their conversations. Who is he? That's when the tears started. Crocodile tears. She broke down, sobbing, telling me it was just a fling, that it didn't mean anything. She swore it was over, that she'd made a mistake, that she loved me and wanted to work things out. But I wasn't buying it. Give me his name, I demanded. She refused at first, but I wasn't letting it go. After a long, heated argument, she finally admitted it was some guy she met at the gym. Of course, the gym. His name was Brian. I didn't know what I was going to do at that point, but I knew one thing. I wasn't about to sit there and play the forgiving husband. Not after what she'd done. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. So I packed a bag and left. That night, my mind was racing. Every memory of our life together. Our wedding, the vacations, the late nights laughing over nothing. All of it felt like a cruel joke. I couldn't let it end like that. No way. I wasn't the kind of guy to sit back and let someone walk all over me. I wanted answers. I wanted to see the man who thought he could sneak into my life and ruin everything I'd built. The next morning, I called my buddy Mike. Mike's one of those guys who always knows somebody who can help, no matter the situation. I told him everything, well, most of it, and asked if he could help me figure out who this Brian guy was. Mike didn't ask too many questions. He just told me to hang tight and give him a few hours. By that afternoon, I had everything I needed: Brian's full name, his address, even the gym where he worked as a trainer. Turns out, the guy was a real piece of work, divorced, no kids, and a reputation for linking up with married women. I decided to pay him a visit. The gym was this sleek, modern place downtown, all glass walls and shiny equipment. I walked in and spotted him right away. He was exactly what I expected: tall, muscular, cocky as hell, walking around in a tank top like he owned the place. I didn't bother with introductions. I marched straight up to him and said, "We need to talk. Now." He looked me up and down, clearly sizing me up. "Who are you?" "Let's just say I'm the husband of the woman you've been screwing behind my back." That wiped the smug look off his face. "Hey man, I don't want any trouble." "Well, you've got it," I snapped. "What the hell makes you think you can mess with another man's wife? You think this is some kind of game?" He tried to play it cool, saying he didn't know she was married, but I wasn't buying it. "Don't lie to me, Brian. You knew exactly what you were doing." The argument escalated fast. People were starting to stare, but I didn't care. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation and rage I felt when I caught her. He finally admitted to it, said it had been going on for a couple of months, that she came on to him. Blah, blah, blah. Like that made it any better. I was so close to decking him right there, but I held back. Barely. Instead, I told him to stay the hell away from her and stormed out. But here's where things took a turn I didn't see coming. When I got back to my car, I noticed something off. There was a black SUV parked a few spaces away, and I swear I saw someone duck down in the driver's seat when I looked over. It gave me a bad feeling, but I brushed it off. I headed back to the motel I'd been staying at since I left the house. I was sitting on the bed, going through my phone, when there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, my wife. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she looked like she hadn't slept. "We need to talk," she said. I stepped aside and let her in, but I wasn't about to make it easy for her. "What do you want?" I asked, crossing my arms. She started in on this whole speech about how sorry she was, how she'd made a huge mistake, how she wanted to fix things. But I couldn't trust a word coming out of her mouth. "Why are you really here?" I asked, and that's when her tone changed. She went from tearful to angry, almost aggressive. "You had no right to go to Brian's gym," she said, her voice rising. "Excuse me?" I said, taken aback. "You embarrassed me," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how that made me look?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're worried about how you look? You cheated on me, and now you're mad because I confronted the guy?" The argument got heated, fast. She started shouting, accusing me of being controlling, saying I drove her to it. I was so stunned. I didn't even see it coming when she grabbed the lamp off the nightstand and hurled it at me. It missed by inches, smashing against the wall. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted, stepping back. Her face twisted into something I didn't even recognize. "You ruined everything," she screamed, lunging at me. I grabbed her wrists to stop her, but she was thrashing, kicking, completely out of control. It was like she'd snapped. I managed to push her back and grabbed my phone to call the cops, but before I could dial, she ran out of the room. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Was this the same woman I'd spent the last 10 years of my life with? Then I saw my car keys were gone. I ran outside just in time to see her peeling out of the parking lot in my truck. I stood there in that motel parking lot, watching the taillights of my own truck disappear into the night, and all I could feel was this boiling rage mixed with a sinking pit of disbelief. She'd cheated on me, lied to my face, tried to attack me, and now she was taking my truck? It felt like some twisted fever dream, but I wasn't about to sit around and let her keep screwing me over. The first thing I did was call Mike. I needed backup, and Mike's the kind of guy who thrives in chaos. He showed up at the motel within 20 minutes, his old beat-up Jeep screeching into the lot. He didn't even ask for details when I called. He just said, "Where are you?" "I'm coming." That's the kind of friend you need in situations like this. "She took my truck," I said as soon as he stepped out. "I don't know where the hell she's going, but I'm not letting her get away with this." Mike lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and nodded. "Let's find her." We started driving around, but I wasn't sure where to even begin. I tried calling her, but of course, she didn't pick up. I tried tracking the truck using the GPS on my phone, but she must have disabled it. Smart. Too smart. Mike and I started throwing out ideas, trying to figure out where she might have gone. Back to the house? To Brian's place? Somewhere else entirely? I was about ready to lose my mind when my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "You shouldn't have messed with Brian. You don't know what you've started." My blood ran cold. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I showed Mike the message, and his face went grim. "This isn't just her," he said. "Brian's involved now." We drove straight to the gym. It was late, almost midnight, but the place was still lit up like a Christmas tree. I didn't even wait for Mike to park the car. I jumped out and stormed up to the front doors, pounding on the glass. One of the staff members, a young guy who looked like he wanted nothing to do with me, came to the door. "Where's Brian?" I barked. "He's not here," the kid stammered. "He left a couple hours ago." I didn't believe him. "Call him. Now." The kid hesitated, and that's when Mike stepped in, towering over him like a grizzly bear. "Do what he says," Mike growled. The kid caved and made the call. Sure enough, Brian answered. But the moment he heard my name, he hung up. I could feel my fists clenching, my knuckles cracking. Mike had to physically pull me back before I broke the door down. "Let's think this through," he said. "If they're working together, they've got a plan. And it probably involves screwing you over even more." That's when it hit me. My house. They were going to my house. We tore out of the parking lot and headed straight there. My heart was pounding the whole way. What if they were trashing the place? What if they were trying to take everything I owned? Or worse, what if they were waiting for me? When we pulled up to the house, the driveway was empty. My truck wasn't there, but the lights inside were on. Mike and I exchanged a glance, and he reached into the back of his Jeep, pulling out a tire iron. "Just in case," he said, handing it to me. We approached the house carefully. The front door was unlocked, which was already a bad sign. I pushed it open, and the first thing I noticed was the broken picture frames on the floor. Our wedding photo, shattered into pieces. It felt like a slap in the face. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the house. No response. We moved through the room slowly, checking every corner. The kitchen was a mess, drawers pulled out, cabinets open, like someone had been looking for something. The living room was trashed too. Cushions torn, furniture flipped over. But it wasn't until we got to the bedroom that things got really bad. The walls were covered in writing. Red spray paint, smeared and dripping like blood. Words like liar and traitor scrawled everywhere. And on the bed, in the middle of the chaos, was my truck key, just sitting there, like a taunt. "This is psychotic," Mike muttered. "We need to call the cops." I was about to agree when we heard it, a creak, coming from upstairs. Mike and I froze. Someone was still in the house. We moved as quietly as we could, creeping up the staircase. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. At the top of the stairs, the door to the guest room was slightly ajar. There was a faint light coming from inside. I motioned for Mike to stay back, then pushed the door open. And there she was, my wife, sitting on the floor with her back to me, holding something in her hands. It took me a second to realize it was a knife. Put it down, I said, my voice low but firm. She didn't move. You don't get it, she whispered. You ruined everything. You couldn't just let it go. Let what go? I snapped. You're the one who cheated. You're the one who lied. How is any of this my fault? She turned to face me, and the look in her eyes chilled me to the bone. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something darker, something unhinged. You had to make it worse, she said, her voice shaking. You had to humiliate me. And now, I have nothing left. Mike stepped into the room behind me, his presence like a wall of strength. Drop the knife, he said, his voice calm but commanding. For a moment, I thought she might listen. But then she lunged. What happened next was a blur. Mike tackled her before she could get close, pinning her to the ground. The knife clattered to the floor, and I grabbed it, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold it. She was screaming, thrashing, completely out of control, but Mike held her down until the cops arrived. When they took her away, she was still screaming, yelling about how I'd ruined her life, how she was going to make me pay. It didn't even sound like her anymore. It was like she'd become someone else entirely. As they loaded her into the back of the squad car, I felt this overwhelming wave of relief mixed with exhaustion. It was over, or so I thought. Because the next morning, I got a call that changed everything. The phone call came at 8 a.m. sharp. I hadn't slept a minute since the cops hauled her away. Mike had crashed on my couch, and we were both running on fumes. When my phone buzzed, I half expected it to be the police with more questions, but it wasn't. It was her. Hello? I answered, my voice raw. Morning, honey. Her voice was calm, eerily calm, like the events of last night had never happened. I just wanted to say, you're going to regret everything you did. What the hell are you talking about? I snapped. You're in jail. There was a pause, and then she laughed, soft, sinister. Not anymore. Brian bailed me out. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. What? Let's just say Brian has connections, she said, her tone smug. Oh, and one more thing. You might want to check your emails. She hung up before I could respond. My hand was shaking as I unlocked my phone and opened my inbox. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just the usual junk mail and a couple of work emails. But then I saw it. A message with no subject line, sent from an unfamiliar address. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. There were photos. Dozens of them. Photos of me, some from years ago, some as recent as yesterday. Me at work, me at home, me at the motel. They'd been following me, tracking my every move. And then there was a video. I clicked on it, and my blood ran cold. It was security footage from my own house, taken just hours before the cops arrived. It showed my wife spray painting the walls, trashing the living room, and planting the truck key on the bed. It was all staged. Every bit of it. But the kicker? The video ended with her looking directly into the camera, holding up a piece of paper with 3 words scrawled in red ink. You can't win. I slammed the phone down, my heart pounding in my chest. Mike, who'd been watching me the whole time, grabbed my shoulder. What's going on? She's not done, I said, my voice shaking. She's trying to set me up. Mike's jaw tightened. We need to get ahead of this. Now. We drove straight to the police station. I showed the cops the email, the video, everything. At first, they seemed skeptical, like maybe I was some paranoid husband trying to spin the narrative. But then one of the officers recognized her from a previous domestic dispute. That got their attention. She's dangerous, I said, practically begging them to listen. She's not just trying to ruin my life. She's trying to destroy me. They promised to investigate, but it didn't feel like enough. I needed something more, some way to protect myself if she came after me again. Mike and I decided to split up for the day. He'd dig into Brian, see if there was anything in his past that could help us, and I'd go back to the house to grab whatever evidence I could find. I didn't like the idea of going back there alone, but I didn't have a choice. When I pulled into the driveway, the place looked exactly as we'd left it, trashed, violated. I stepped inside, my senses on high alert. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside had me spinning around, half expecting her to jump out of the shadows. I went straight to the office, digging through drawers and files, looking for anything that could prove what she'd been up to. And that's when I found it, a burner phone, hidden at the back of the desk drawer. It was locked, but it didn't take me long to figure out the passcode. It was the same damn code she used for everything. Our wedding anniversary. The phone was full of messages between her and Brian, detailing every step of their plan. They'd been plotting this for months. How to get me out of the picture, how to make it look like I was the abusive one, how to take everything I had. There were even messages about transferring money out of our joint account into some offshore account I didn't even know existed. I felt a surge of vindication, followed immediately by fury. They'd wanted to ruin me, destroy my reputation, my life. And for what? Because I didn't pay enough attention? Because I wasn't fun anymore? I was about to take the phone and get the hell out of there when I heard it, a car pulling into the driveway. My stomach twisted. I looked out the window and saw Brian stepping out of my truck. Behind him was my wife, her face twisted in that same unhinged grin I'd seen last night. I had no time to think. They were coming for me. I grabbed the tire iron Mike had left in his Jeep and positioned myself near the front door. When it swung open, Brian walked in first, looking around like he owned the place. "Come on out," he called, his voice dripping with mockery. "Let's settle this like men." He never saw it coming. I stepped out from behind the door and swung the tire iron with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with his shoulder, sending him crashing to the floor with a roar of pain. My wife screamed and lunged at me, but I sidestepped her and shoved her against the wall. "This is over," I shouted, my voice raw with rage. "I've got everything, your messages, your plan. The cops are on their way." She froze, her eyes wide with panic. Brian was groaning on the floor, clutching his shoulder, but I didn't take my eyes off her. "You tried to ruin me," I said, my voice trembling, "but you lost." The cops arrived minutes later, and this time, they didn't hesitate. Both of them were arrested on the spot, Brian for trespassing and assault, and her for everything else. The evidence I'd gathered sealed the deal. As they hauled her away, she screamed at me, her voice shrill and broken. "You'll never be free of me." But she was wrong. I was finally free. It's been weeks now, and I'm still picking up the pieces of my life. The divorce is in progress, the restraining order is in place, and I'm starting to feel like myself again. It hasn't been easy, but I'm getting there. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's this. You never really know what someone is capable of until they show you their true face. I just wish I hadn't had to see hers.